All right, Chris, we're back. It's the Bully Pulpit, episode 23. And it wasn't the first thing on the list, but so the audience knows we were chatting before this, and you brought up we have to talk about RFK Jr. So you know what? Let's just jump right in. You got me primed, and I really want to talk about it. So tell, in case somebody didn't see, what's going on with RFK Jr.
RFK Jr. is an article, and it's all over the news, but it's in the New York Times, that he said in an interview that he was diagnosed with a worm in his brain. Doctors found a worm in his brain. And I can't even put my first thing. It was like there was a kind of a ginned up, not particularly good survey that had him getting 20% nationally, right, of the vote, or 24 or something, and 90% of that are people going, I hate Trump, I hate Biden. Let me just find somebody fucking normal to vote for. Right. And then you pick up the paper, and this guy is like saying, I had a worm in my brain. And like, and it's just like, is it too early to start drinking? I mean, it's like, fuck me. I mean.
Let me tell you my favorite part of this story. They found a dead parasitic worm in his brain, right? My favorite part is that the worm went into his brain, ate some of his brain, and then died. Mm-hmm. It was eating the brain that killed him.
Yeah,
it was. I love it that that you could play on that in so many different ways. That like whatever drugs this guy has done over his life, which he's done many, and we know about, everything about him. He was so toxic to even a parasitic worm in his brain that the worm was like, you know what? Fuck it. I guess I'm dying.
His natural defense system, his immune system.
Exactly.
But you know what? By the way, the other thing I thought of is that there is it was a night gallery, and it's also a famous short story. I think it's Richard Matheson or somebody. And it's about the earwig. And an earwig.
What's an earwig?
An earwig in this short story was a rare tropical bug that you would put in somebody's ear. It would crawl in their ear and eat away the brain, and they would slowly go crazy.
Oh my God.
In the short story, somebody's trying to kill another guy. And so he hires somebody to put an earwig into his nemesis's brain, and the next day they wake up and the guy says, oh my God, I accidentally put the earwig in your brain, not the other guy's. and so the short story is about him. Am I going crazy? Am I think I'm crazy? And it's like that whole kind of thing. It ends with the earwig crawling out the other end, and he says, I'm sane, and this thing, so whatever it did, the damage is irreparable, and it's great. And he goes to the doctor, and I had the earwig, and blah, 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 blah. And the doctor says, well, the earwig came out, but I've got some bad news. It was a female and laid eggs in your brain. So the earwig, right? Anyway, it's a very good short story, and I think it's Richard Matheson. I forget, but it's but that's what I thought. Whatever the worm was, laid eggs in his brain. But what an oddball thing to disclose. I mean,
I do wonder, do you think somebody got a hold of the story and asked him to comment and he tried to get ahead of it? Like, why did he disclose that? What's the point?
I just think he's wired that way. And I've met people like that in politics especially. I mean, it was like the guy the other week that lied about having a Bronze Star, right? Or having 2 Bronze Stars. It's the same kind of mentality that they have to be special and unique. And there was something, and I think the reason public service politics, or celebrity entertainers. I mean, you meet them and you're a fucking freak. And there's something that drives them into the spotlight. And I think that this is like, he probably thought it was a story that went well over, dinner parties or with his friends, and wow, that's really wild. And it's like, yeah, not only I'm fine, but I think that maybe it has something to do with environmental toxins. Whether the fuck he said it was, that's global warming because I don't know.
You know who's really fucking happy that he can't keep his mouth shut about it is Christy Nome.
Oh fuck yeah! By the way,
she's like, oh, thank God, a news cycle without me being on the front page killing a dog.
I think that should be. If there was a book about her writing the book and her promoting the book on news things, I would fucking watch that because I've seen a lot of disasters in my time, but this is like, it's an ongoing disaster, and the Kim Il-jung thing. Have you seen that?
Tell me about that.
Oh,
no.
This was great. So in the book, she talks about that when I met with Kim Il-jung, I stared him right in the eye, and I recognized that look of somebody bent on destruction and evil because I'm the mother of 4 children. Ha 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 ha. Right? It was like she meant it as like a little joke, but in the book, she forget that like you compared your kids to a fucking genocidal dictator. All right.
Yeah.
Forget about that metaphor. But she made it all up because she never met Kim Il-jung. And right.
Oh my God.
Well, but wait, there's more. And I think she was on CBS, and somebody said, "Well, you never met with Kim Il-jung," and she was like, "Yeah, that I don't know how it got into the book because it was a mistake of the printing." And the printer, the publisher, said, "Yeah, it was an early galley and it was excised and it shouldn't have been in there." Okay, here's the fucking kicker. You know who read the audiobook version of her book? Christy Nome.
She did. She read it, didn't she?
And it's like, yeah, you would think that, like, I'm reading a story about, then Chris Mottola cured cancer as he fought on the 5th Crusade, and you go, that didn't happen, and you go, how's that in there? As opposed to saying Chris Mottola cured cancer, and then let me rephrase that. Chris Mottola cured cancer. I mean, what the fuck is the matter with you? I mean, it's great.
Wow.
I mean, talk about, and that whoever's advising her apparently, might be Corey Lewandowski, who knows? But whoever's advising her, didn't pull the plug on this immediately, and didn't catch any of this, or didn't, that there's not a basic, like when you write a book. I mean, I've ghosted articles and I've ghosted books for things and rewritten stuff, and it goes to a fact checker, and the fact checker then calls you up and they'll say, and it's usually a couple hours, and they'll say, Chris, you said you vacationed in Barstow last year. Where in Barstow were you? Where did you go? Do you have? It's like if I needed receipts, could I have them? I mean, it's all kind of crap like that. And again, it's the better the publisher, the more rigorous it is. But it's something that everybody does. And clearly that wasn't done. Or she said, "Oh yeah, I remember I met with him." I mean, yeah.
You remember when Brian Williams said that he was in a helicopter that was under attack in Iraq or something like that?
And then there were a bunch of things, and he saw dead bodies floating in Louisiana and during Katrina. Yeah, but it's the same thing. I mean, the funny part is it makes Sarah Palin, I see, Russia, seem coherent, seem stolid.
Interesting thing is that, I mean, not to necessarily defend Sarah Palin, but she actually has kind of a less false claim, because like people don't. I think she could say, well, I'm speaking metaphorically. People don't realize how close we are to Russia. It is very close through the Bering Strait.
Apparently, that's what she said, and it was kind of parody on Saturday Night Live, and Saturday Night Live thing became the bit. And
right,
and which is always a danger. There's no way to get around that kind of stuff. I mean, it's like Bill Clinton that shut down traffic for a $200 haircut, which wasn't true, or George Bush didn't know how to use a supermarket scanner, which wasn't true. and that happens. But like this is like, but you know, but gnome stuff is like just like it's like hitting yourself in the face with a ball-peen hammer, and you go, that hurts, and you wake up the next day and you hit yourself again, so that really hurts too. You know, and now she's blaming it on
You know what must really hurt her even more, actually, is what was Trump's response to it? I think he said like that's disgusting, or like there's a quote from Trump. I didn't know we were gonna. I didn't plan on bringing her back up, but I was reading the other day. The assumption is that she was really speaking to an audience of one. She thought she found a path onto the ticket, right? So for that, of everything that's going against her, and then for him to throw that on, like it was a very negative quote. Like that's got to be the ultimate. And I don't know. I'm always, one of the most interesting things for me in politics is second acts, like people who do make comebacks. Probably, I guess Nixon would be like the most famous one, you know. But like, where does she go from here? I don't think. I don't know. I'm really curious about what will happen next in her career more than what's happening right now, in a way, because I just think that what she's done is like fodder for the rest of her career. It's going to be played over and over again. That time she met with Kim Jong-il. Oh, wait. No, she didn't. And what's amazing is not only did she not meet with Kim Jong-il, but in her imagining and creating this story, she thought, you know, it'd be funny if I considered him like, if I compared him to my kids.
Yeah. Well,
it says something so deeply psychological about her that she just like made up the story and then decided to throw in her kids in that story.
Well, you know, and I hate to say it, but it's kind of, so second acts is a really good discussion to have. But, you know, a lot of her prevarications, you know, when Biden had to drop out in '88 running for president, it was because he just was making up shit, you know, and he still does. He said, I was class valedictorian. No, you weren't. I finished at the top of my class.
Right.
You know,
right.
You know, he's got all these apocryphal stories that you know, I had a double major. It was like, what the fuck are you talking about? You know, and
right.
You know, and Biden was considered deader than fried chicken for ages. You know, but Biden was also a half century United States senator too.
Right.
For, you know, 40, 50 or whatever he was, United States senator. And so there's a certain amount of gravitas. And by the way, Biden had brain surgery too, right after that. So maybe it's an RFK thing. He had a brain tumor that they had.
Maybe we just don't realize there's a pandemic of these brain-eating worms among politicians. Right? Maybe.
Yeah, and they're killing the worms because even the worms.
I mean, most people you talk to like most Americans, they would probably assume that if they're a politician, they have to have some sort of brain-eating parasite. Right. There's definitely something going on with them.
You know, but there is a good thing that you are never dead in American politics until you're dead.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, Lincoln famously lost 5 times before he was president.
Something
Right. Crazy. You know, Nixon, as you said, you know, the famous Nixon when he lost for governor in California, said, "Well, you won't have Nixon to kick around anymore." But indeed, we did.
Right.
You know,
right.
Biden, you know, one of my former clients, Arlen Specter, lost back-to-back races for mayor, DA, Senate, and governor. He lost 4 in a row before he became Pennsylvania's first 5-term U.S. senator. You know, so it's really interesting that you're never dead until you're dead. But also in all those cases, though, you know, not that I'm conflating all of them together, but they were all considered serious people who had serious long-term jobs.
Right.
You know,
right.
I mean, you know, nobody was going to say that Nixon wasn't serious. Nobody was ever going to say Arlen Specter wasn't serious. Nobody said Biden wasn't serious. I mean, you know, and so in order for her, you know, I mean, she's really, I hate her hairstyle, by the way, but because I don't think it's a serious hairstyle. I mean, I think,
Right.
if you look at what working women executives are, that's not how they look. But
Oh, interesting. I didn't even know what her hair. I had to pull it up. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Kind of like the long with ringlets or whatever.
yeah, I mean, if you're a woman CEO, you do that when you go to a wedding. That's like a wedding thing,
Uh,
and basically what she's doing is she's auditioning for an executive job.
oh yeah, I just pulled up Sheryl Sandberg as like a comparison. I see what you mean.
Yeah. But and again, I mean, cosmetically, but same thing with guys, same thing with men too. I mean, showing up looking inappropriate is, and again, I mean, it's
Yeah.
sexism that it affects women more than men, but that's the rule. I mean, it's
Right.
tough shit. That's kind of, life is unfair. Um, but
I
yeah,
don't think there's ever been a skin-headed bald guy president and with a little scruff on his face. Is
right,
your point either? Right.
right.
Yeah.
I
Yeah, it's
mean,
true. You have to look the part.
yeah, and presidents tend to be very tall. There is a great
Yeah.
theory about the tallness of presidents, that the tallest candidate wins all the time, historically. Uh,
Oh, interesting.
yeah. Um, Reagan.
Which is interesting, by the way, because it for like let's just say I will say my opinion. There's a love affair with Putin on the right.
Mhm,
He is actually far shorter than our presidents,
yeah.
and yet the right fawns over him as this powerful. Actually, even Trump fawns over him as this powerful leader. But he is a shorter man. He's probably about my height. He's like 5'8", 5'9", something
Mhm.
like that. So he might be a bit taller, but I don't think much taller. There's several pictures of Obama like looking down at him, like talking, So
Yeah, but I mean, we and it's people vote for taller people. I mean, um,
Americans certainly do. I think I don't know about internationally, like Macron or some of the Italians. Berlusconi was tall, I believe, but I don't know about any of the other.
yeah, and
Um,
Thatcher notoriously beat men, and men they were all taller than her. But there's something, maybe it's just a statistical outlier that. Um, but yeah, so but anyway, back to no, she's really young, especially in politics, and like I think she survives and has a second act. If she goes off
mm,
and does something serious, like she becomes the organ transplant advocate. She becomes the hydroelectric person. I mean, she becomes something that's
mm.
like super wonky and technical. And when you get asked about that, and 10 years from now, when you run for president, if she, whatever she wants to do, you go, yeah, that was pretty stupid. Ha ha ha, boy, what a disaster that was. And you own it and you move on.
Right, right, right.
But if not,
Yeah, I mean, there's something. Yeah, I think there's a good point to that. I remember, I think it was like high school political science. We covered Reagan pretty thoroughly, and the kind of the teacher put forth a hypothesis. I don't know if it's ever been
Mhm.
proven, but like what helped Reagan, because he was just kind of a vapid movie star guy, but it was when he partnered with General Electric and he started doing I guess it was like the nightly series where he really started to discuss and talk about political things that elevated him. Now, he had been the head of the Screen Actors Guild, and there's a political element to being the head of a union and everything, but he wasn't seen. The populace, the public started to see Reagan as this thought leader before there was, I guess, such a term, through this General Electric like nightly news, like
It was
five
a
ten
weekly
minute thing that
it
he
was a
did.
weekly thing. It was a weekly thing.
Was it weekly? Okay, cool. Yeah.
But he had gone from the Screen Actors Guild, and the Screen Actors Guild, during the McCarthy era, and if you read fair-handed accounts of it, he was probably pretty much down the middle, appropriate on it. He wasn't like a crazy,
Mm.
red baiter. It was. Um, here's two interesting Reagan stories, which kind of go to this point. One on the election, one in terms of his development. Um, after the General Electric thing, which was a couple of years, he became more and more political, and famously gave a speech in support of Barry Goldwater in '64, which is how kind of money people said this guy should run for governor of California. And he won 2 landslide victories as governor of California, and by anybody's, estimation, did a good job. What he did, though, after he was governor of California till the time he wrote for president, he had this minute-long, or was it 2-minute? It was either a minute or 2-minute commentary, syndicated commentary on the radio. And basically it was, I don't know. This is Ronald Reagan. The problem with energy, the problem with global warming, the problem with the Soviets is that they're truculent and we need to be as strong as they are. I'll be back in a moment to talk more. And there would be a commercial and it would come back and he would do this minute or so thing. It was all written by him. And he did all the research for it too. And so he spent 15 years, what, 70, what was he, 70? Anyway, basically handwriting, there's a book called Reagan in His Own Hand. And it's all his notes for these thousands of mini editorials. And it taught him, and basically they used to, subscribe to, when you still had newspapers, they would subscribe to 1 million newspapers, and somebody would just clip, I think this is good. And he had giant stacks of things. He would go through them once a week and he would pick 3 or 4 and he would write these things down. They would get typed up. He would edit them. And the book is really fascinating because you get to see the creative process. But he learned how to do 2 things. He learned how to stay topical with stuff because he was going through reading multiple newspapers every day. More importantly, or as importantly, he learned how to communicate them in really short, understandable bites.
Yeah.
And so he could explain something, it wasn't politicians put out, 50-point position papers, or used to anyway, that nobody fucking reads, and he could do it in a minute. Right? But the other thing,
Wow.
so to go to the Reagan things, this is the kind of the neat part. Ad Age's Man of the Year in 1980 was a guy named Richard Worthman, who was one of the great political consultants of all time. Actually, I think he's still alive. And he was Reagan's pollster. And he said the entire campaign is about Reagan. It's not about Carter. People have decided they think Carter sucks, but they're undecided on Reagan. And this entire campaign is about Reagan. And right now, people know 3 things about Reagan. They know he was an actor, they know he's an ideologue, and they know he was governor of California. The entire campaign is about reversing all 3. They need to know he was governor of California first, they know ideologue second, and an actor third. And so if you look at, and you can go online and find them, every spot that Reagan did in the 1980 election were so boring as to be beyond belief. And they were literally said, like 90% of the spots are him sitting in a chair in like a study. And he says, as governor of California, I blah, 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 blah. As governor of California, I blah, 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 blah. As governor of California, I blah, 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 blah. And so what they did is they flipped the whole thing. And so when October came around and people were like, I fucking hate Carter because, the Russians, Afghanistan, inflation, unemployment, blah, 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 blah. Reagan became the recipient. So all these undecided and soft voters moved to Reagan because they thought, well, he was a successful 2-term governor of California, so how bad could it be? But it goes to that thing. So, so part of it was like self-development, self-improvement. And by the way, self-improving is kind of cool because he's doing this incredible self-improving in his late 50s and 60s, which is fucking remarkable because most people are confused.
Cool.
But more importantly, politically, they understood that what people knew about Reagan, Bedtime for Bonzo and a bunch of shitty B movies. King's Row is pretty good. King's Row is actually a good movie, where he gets his legs amputated. In the movie, it's a famous novel, and it's a pretty good movie. But the famous line that Reagan does in King's Row is he wakes up and he says, "Where's the rest of me?" Because a sadistic doctor had cut his legs off unnecessarily.
Wow.
But anyway, so that's way more fucking trivia than Reagan trivia than anybody needs ever.
No, it's so interesting. And people forget, like, the right loves to talk about how he fired all of the FAA workers, but he didn't do that because he wanted to break up a union. He was a union guy. I don't think he was anti-union at all. It was because they broke the law and he wasn't having it. He was pissed.
Yeah, I mean, any president has a mixed legacy, but I think that he was really interesting in terms of his background, and what's kind of interesting in a lot of ways. I won't say it's Obama-like, but it's Obama-like that came from broken families with shithead fathers. I mean, Reagan's father was an alcoholic that left the family, and Obama's father was off doing whatever he was doing.
Left the family. I don't know.
Yeah, he left the family, and they kind of had this first career doing other things, and they came because they could articulate a sense of nation, a sense of a people, and hit the right spot at the right time. You know, does Reagan win in 92? I doubt it. Does, Obama win in 2016? I doubt it. But it's kind of interesting. I mean, Gerald Ford was president, and he was adopted. I think he was the first president that was adopted. Nixon came from a broken home. So.
We keep trying to solve these. We keep trying to, the family, trying to solve the family, family values. Maybe we need less family values. We end up with more presidents.
Yeah, I think Biden had a broken family too. I think I want to say his father was an alcoholic.
Is that right?
Yeah, but I mean,
oh wow,
because he talks about his mother, he doesn't talk about his father a lot. But I think that
he doesn't really talk about his dad.
No, he talks about mom and Scranton shit like that. But I think that. By the way, there is something that, kids put under stress tend either to fall apart or become high achievers. And I think that these guys, Obama and these guys fall into that category.
I can't remember the coach's name, but the guy who, like, the private trainer coach that worked with Michael Jordan and Kobe Bryant, he came from kind of that kind of family as well. And he talked about how he and his brother kind of went in different paths. And he talked about that quite a bit. You mentioned, though, you were talking about, I wanted to point out, pivot on something.
Mm-hmm.
So covered RFK Jr. Let's talk a little bit about business, because did you see that the Justice Department is investigating Elon and Tesla over, I guess they've been overstating the self-driving capabilities of Teslas?
No, I didn't, but I'm not surprised.
My favorite part of this story is that, meanwhile, while they're being investigated for overstating their capabilities, 737 Maxes have been crashing, door plugs have been falling out, and whistleblowers are dropping dead.
That's great, right?
I think the Justice Department has, their priorities in line. Any chance, over under 50% chance, Boeing gets nationalized, or there's some sort of forced divestiture, or something will happen at Boeing?
I think the latter. I don't think they get nationalized because, the easy argument is I don't want the people running the DMV to run Boeing. But I think that there is some kind of a breakup, or they're sawed off. So I had a friend that worked in the finishes and fabrication plant at Boeing for years.
Oh, wow.
And they used to call it the Lazy Bee Ranch. And he said the quality control on it was fucking awful. And they were just doing, making it look good. I mean, that was, their job wasn't to, their job was to, make the paint look great and shit like that. But he said the quality control was awful. And it was management. It was a management thing. But
There
yeah,
was a CEO. Go ahead.
no. I mean, I'm gonna grab coffee. Hold on here.
Okay. Um, I'll tell you also. Can you hear me?
By the way, can I tell you how I think the Musk thing hurts Biden? Because I mean, you put it perfectly that shit's falling out of the sky, and you're picking on a guy that's an innovator. And I get he's
All
controversial. I
right.
get that he's unlikable, and I seriously doubt that Biden is calling up Merrick Garland and said put somebody on so we can put Elon Musk in his place. That shit's not happening. But there is some little
Right.
fucking weasel in the Justice Department that thinks this is a good idea. And
Right.
and I've had this discussion with political offices for 40 years when they do something like that. And it's like, what's the fucking thought here? What's the impulse? Do you
Right.
think that this is going to help you? And again,
Right.
my job has never been governance. My job has always been election, get elected. But it's like but when that kind of shit happens, it's like, who the fuck thought this was a good idea? To do
Exactly.
some kind of petty bullshit.
Especially for someone who's pretty popular with enough people. I understand on the left,
Yeah.
he's not very popular because he's seen as being a certain way, but he does have a following. Like, people do like him, and I think people that are potentially swing votable is a portion of that. There are certainly some kind of people that are not swing
Mm-hmm.
votes that like him, but I do, just in the circles that I'm in, there are young tech people who are more progressive than your average Joe who like Elon Musk because he is doing interesting shit, and
Right.
he's building interesting companies, and he's solving real human problems. I mean, what was the person they had I don't remember why, but they had massive brain damage, and they have the chip in their brain now, and there's a video of them smiling because they can communicate for the first time with thought.
Yeah.
And that's pretty good fucking PR. And now you're going to go after this guy for what? He overstated the self-driving capabilities of Tesla.
Right.
I
Yeah.
don't know what to do for you, you know?
Yeah. And again, I mean, there was a lot. I mean, I understand why people do not like him,
Yeah.
but everybody loves their Tesla, or most people love their Teslas. They love the idea of electric cars.
Right.
And, and so much of this stuff he's doing is open source, right? I mean, that's the
Right.
other amazing
He
part of it.
gave the battery technology away, didn't he?
Yeah. Yeah.
He did the
And,
fair use of, yeah.
and so, so at worst, he's this kind of interesting, quirky, but again, he's doing stuff. I mean, SpaceX, what the fuck? I mean, like, what exactly does he have to do to get it in everybody's good graces? And again, I'm neither a fan nor a foe, but it's just like, of all the people you're going to pick on, that ain't the guy I would pick on,
Exactly right. Especially, again, with the other, when you look at, if you are the type of person that watches CNBC and politics,
Mhm.
and you read, oh, DOJ investigating Elon and Tesla, 5 seconds after seeing a story about the door plug of a Boeing plane coming out, you're like, why are they investigating that one? That doesn't. If it doesn't make sense, it doesn't make sense, right?
Right. And people are very intuitive about picking that up. And I will say, to kind of drive this back to the election, that I think that they're playing a dangerous game with Trump if the Justice Department is seen as being vindictive, going after Musk for bullshit. And, and essentially right now, the two New York lawsuits against Trump is that, he paid a hooker and he overstated his real estate value, which sounds like every fucking realtor in New York that I've known right? I mean, and again, I'm not going to argue the legality of either, the morality of either, because they fall on the other side. But that's what you're doing, I mean, it's
right.
You kind of go, oh my god.
Well, Yeah, listen, there's another story in here I wanted to throw out. The U.S. So again, so DOJ's has obviously no understanding about prioritization of
Yeah.
cases, perhaps. The Department of Education now, I saw there is the DOJ, I guess, is working with the Department of Education, opening up a civil rights investigation into here in Texas, the Katy, Texas Independent School District, because of a policy of telling parents if their kids are requesting to use different pronouns.
Mm-hmm.
So the policy was, if some little kid or whatever age, some child goes to school, says, I want to be called these pronouns, the parents get a call. Regardless of how you feel about that, is that a civil rights violation? I mean, it is their parents. And everyone who, I'm going to guess, there was an overwhelming support, bipartisan, to get rid of TikTok because it was a threat to children and children's data. I thought the whole point was to kind of protect kids and to involve parents and apparently involve the government into what social media apps are available.
Yeah.
But now there's no coherent, right? Because, and this is actually something I do want to share. This is a great quote, and I'll tell you the story that goes with this in a minute. This was said, it's probably somebody famous, but I heard somebody else say it. We don't see things as they are. We see things as we are.
Yeah, that's great.
And I think that's how laws and everything are getting enforced, not by how things are, but how we see them as how they are.
Yeah, but the Texas thing, it's, again, this is what you want to, I mean, the idea that parents aren't morally and legally have a primacy for minors is good luck fighting that out, And,
right.
And it's
just a loser. It's a loser politically.
Yeah, and I get it, and I get that some parents and some kids at some age, it becomes, what was the movie? Footloose, the Footloose cliche. You can't listen to that rock and roll, you're going to go to hell. You can't.
Yeah.
What are you, gay? I mean,
right.
And again, most of that is, I get it. I certainly understand there are cases like that, but but for the most part, people are like, well, they're my kids. I want the best for them. And I know I wouldn't say a lot. I know a number of people who have kids that use pronouns, some who have actually in the middle of transitioning, and they ain't happy about it, but
right.
They love their kids and they're supporting and they're trying to do the best thing. And I think that is the far majority of parents. So that, the idea that you're going to pass a law for some isolated theatrical concept, it's just like, once again, is this the fight you want to have? Right?
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
I mean, aren't there other fights you can have on this?
Exactly right. To use an analogy that you used prior to us recording, be a little bit more like the DA that only takes cases you can win.
Right.
Choose your fight smartly. Why choose something that the majority of people don't agree with you on? Like, fight the thing that... It's interesting, actually. Texas is going in a very interesting direction because another Texas story I have on here, did you see Representative Cuellar? I don't know how to say his name. Henry Cuellar, Democrat from Laredo, indicted on bribery and money laundering.
Yeah.
Texas is a state that I don't know if it's trending blue, but it's certainly trending more purplish than just deep red, right? I mean, there's definitely, it's moving. So to compound however, there is a huge difference between a Texas liberal and a New York progressive. There is a drastic difference between those two things. And these social war, like the social battles, like that is a winner in Texas, because Texas liberals are kind of the culture war stuff. They're pretty much in agreement on some of that stuff. So I think Democrats may lose that seat. I don't think that they're going to be able to defend it. He was an incumbent. He was able to keep it. But now with him out and an open race, I think it could swing. I don't know. What are your thoughts? Is he going to, first of all, is he going to run and stay in office just like Menendez in New Jersey as long as possible? And second, do you see that district swinging to Republican? Do you think that's going to be a flip seat?
It can be a flip seat. It's a tough flip seat. If the Democrats nominate even somebody remotely normal, they should hold that seat. To your point that the Texas is clearly moving purple. I think that they've generally had terrible candidates and running terrible campaigns statewide, or else they could have picked up some seats. But to your point is the social stuff drives people crazy. And it drives people crazy for two reasons. It says to people, if you were for something silly, you don't think like I do, and more importantly, you don't respect what I think. That's one, but that's secondary to, this is the shit you're focusing on?
Right.
Priorities. I mean, I've talked often about Mario Cuomo in New York State and Christopher Smith, congressman in New Jersey. Cuomo is famously anti-death penalty. Smith is famously pro-life, and they win in places consistently, or did consistently, where they shouldn't have, because a majority of voters opposed their views. But they came at it, that position, as an act of faith and conscience. And so people will go, I disagree with that, but I like that about you, and I respect that about you, that you're not going to move from what you truly believe. And at the same time, being for fucking kooky shit because it's trendy, you kind of like, defending the idea that because there might be a shitty parent somewhere, someplace, we're not going to tell parents what's going on in their schools with their kids.
Right.
I mean, it's also, I think it's the Oliver Wendell Holmes thing. I think or was it that, but he said, hard cases make bad laws. And when you have to slice things really thinly, they tend to backfire. They're not bad factor, the unintended consequences. I think that's true.
Yeah, there's a lot to be said about that. There's in Taoism, there's one of the teachings is that
get out.
Once you, oh wow, are you in? I had no idea. I have. I don't know what. I don't think I have that copy, but
I've got that. I read it all the time, and I have a friend of mine that is very into it, and we chat occasionally about it. But actually, I had a college course in religion, and that kind of really stuck. I mean, trust me, I've not followed anything, because I'm still going, yeah, fuck you too. I mean, I'm still that guy, but.
Well, the interesting thing, so you're going to know this when I say it, is like one of the concepts is that when you assume you have to create laws to enforce morality, you remove morality. Yeah. It's basically saying when you don't have to do these things and it arises from the culture, it's real. When you have to enforce it, it isn't real, right?
Right.
And that's very much what I hear about that Oliver Wendell Holmes or whoever it was, is like, it's a hard case because we don't know who we are in this situation, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
Culturally, you're really trying to thread a needle, and you're best left to let the culture decide for itself. Or let the culture decide until it becomes an easier case, and then we can very bluntly swing our axe and say this is where it's going to divide.
I'll move this to abortion too, which is an interesting thing, which kind of really illustrates your point, is that regardless of what your view is on abortion, the United States was pretty much alone in having abortion be decided by edict, by a court. And virtually every other Western country, there were these very convulsive legislative battles and political battles. And people lost careers, people won careers, and until, there was a national referendum in Ireland, I guess, 10 years ago. But every country, every democracy had these battles about abortion, except the United States. We had a court say, this is the rule. And so there's never been a consensus. And, and Republicans on abortion, when Roe finally got overturned, were kind of like the dog that caught the car. They hadn't thought it through. And I think what you're seeing now in a bunch of abortion being in the forefront is a very good thing, as uncomfortable as it makes everybody, and as, there are going to be some horrible things that are going to result from it. But you're going to come up with a consensus that has been delayed for half a century. That, and again, I think where it's going to come down to some kind of a, Western European standard of, it's going to be somewhere between 8 and 20 weeks, and people are going to figure out what that is and what they're comfortable with, and that's going to be it. But it goes to the thing is, sometimes in government, sometimes in politics, you have to have these convulsions. You have to have this heated passion shit to figure out where you're going.
I 100% agree with you, Chris, because, I've been watching this PBS documentary about fascism, specifically in the U.S. in the 30s. And
fascinating, right?
One of the things they talk, it's incredibly fascinating. And one of the things they talk about, and, if anybody, I guess, has studied the rise of socialism and communism and fascism, a lot of it had to do with the response to the Great Depression around the world. As they lost faith in the system and they needed to replace it. And one of the things that, as a quick aside, by the way, I went to the Museum of Horrors in Berlin. It's like where the Nazis committed all these atrocities, and then later the secret police, like the East German secret police, all kinds of stuff. And there was a quote by, I've tried to Google it many times to find it, but it said something that Nazism or Hitler rose not through power. The people wanted to shake themselves free of the bondage of freedom. Something like that. It was basically they didn't. So to your point, what I also hear in the American Nazism is that they want it all to be okay. They don't want the strife. They don't want the struggle. And what I've argued to people before is that no, your aversion to the battle of politics and how we have to compete with each other, as long as it's peaceful, that your aversion to that is an aversion to democracy itself. That is literally what democracy it is. You're competing for ideas, and you must agree. And it's oftentimes it isn't even set. Like you think you've resolved it, and then 100 years later you deal with it again, and it could swing the other way the next time.
And it is supposed to be suck. It's supposed to suck. It is ugly and messy, and
right.
And the idea of that we want a strong man to cut the Gordian knot and solve all the problems, because it will require no effort on our part. Right. It will require not voting in a school.
Okay, so
right.
This is literally the perfect way to wrap up. The last thing on my thing here is nearly half of the people that were polled in America give credit for infrastructure, or say who did the most or is doing the most for infrastructure, to Trump.
That's great.
At the same time, people were like cursing Biden for his $1.4 trillion spending package on infrastructure. So here's what I think. And this is where the quote about we see things not as they are, but how we are. to your point, I think democracy is actually against our nature. It isn't our inherent nature. It is a lot of effort. It is a lot of work. It is uncomfortable. And we get annoyed because we live in a democratic system where we keep thinking we're electing somebody to solve all of our problems. And when that doesn't come true, we literally swing the other way. And we're like, well, this person is going to do it. Rather than realizing the only solution to our problems is for, as neighbors, us to all work together to solve them. You can't just put a president in and think he's going to make everything perfect. It's literally your city councilman, your neighborhood watch, all of these things. But we don't want to do any of that.
Right.
It's far easier to be like, well, the trains run on time. So if a couple of Jews are going to the gas chamber, Hitler's got the whole thing covered. It's good, right?
Right. There was and if you get TCM if you can get TCM.
Yeah, Turner Classic Movies. I got you. Yeah.
There is a movie called The Seventh Cross, which is a fairly low budget movie, but it stars Spencer Tracy, and it takes place at the very beginning of World War II, and a bunch of people escaped from a concentration camp, and there are 7 of them, and people all get caught, and the last one not getting caught is Spencer Tracy, and he goes back to his hometown, and he doesn't know is his former best friend. Now he's got a great job working for the Nazis. Can he trust him? Is he, and they don't kind of talk about, they leave out religion and ethnicity out of it a little bit, kind of.
Sure.
But it's this really kind of, and again, it's not a big budget movie, but it's this really fascinating thing where everybody's saying in the movie, we were in a depression. Now we're all working. We got more bread. We got shit to do. Life is pretty good. And
right.
I don't particularly like these people, but life is pretty good. And I'm not going to go back to that. And anyway, but that's the movie. And it's,
yeah.
And it's shockingly tense. I mean, it's, I had to pause it one time and go, what the fuck? I mean, I don't particularly am vulnerable to that kind of thing, but a couple times I had to go, fuck, and pause it, and
my blood pressure is rising.
Yeah. But
okay, that's great, Chris. I lied. One last thing.
Yeah.
Indiana, Trump got under 80%. Nikki Haley got 21.7%. Should he be worried?
Yeah.
It's Indiana. It's Indiana. That should not have happened.
Yeah, and I believe Indiana is a closed primary too.
Yeah.
So
and Maryland's coming up on the 14th. I have the over/under for him. I think he's under 75 after seeing the Indiana result.
Yeah, I think so too. By the way, how did Braun? Didn't we have an over/under for Braun?
So those results I haven't seen yet.
Okay. What was
you have one more second? Let's see let's see what I have here.
I was trying to remember what it was. I was trying to remember what the over/under was last night. I saw it with about 50% of the vote in.
Yeah, Mike Braun primary results. So Mike Braun did win the primary, but let's see, what was the percentage that he got?
Was it over 50 we had? Was that it? Over 60?
I did have it over 50. Actually, I think I had it 51 point something or 50 and some change.
I had it under.
You had under, and I actually asked you, I said, I asked you if you thought even under 50% with him winning still, but under 50. You said you would even maybe think about under 50, but gubernatorial. Nobody's given the, let's see. Oh, here we go. I might have to put it in the
notes.
Yeah, let's see. Okay, so Ballotpedia. You use Ballotpedia?
Yeah. It's not a perfect source, but it's a pretty good source. It's got a lot of good shit in it.
Yeah. Wow. 39.5%, Chris.
That's by the way, that's
A lot
shocking.
of
I would have thought it would have been in the 40s. But so
Suzanne Crouch did way better than I thought she would. I mean, she was the strong second. She got 21.9.
That's surprising. Yeah. So I'm
Yeah,
not
that's
surprised
pretty
it's under
weak.
50, I guess. But yeah, I mean, under 40, I'm kind of shocked at.
Wow.
Maybe we'll
I don't know what's. Yeah, what do you think that means for? So he's running. So he'll be against Jennifer McCormick. She was uncontested for the Democrats. I think it's pretty hard for a Democrat to be the governor of Indiana.
Yeah, it's a pretty conservative state.
All right. I will see you. That's it. We did it. I'll see you next week.
Thanks, brother. Talk to you
Bye.
soon.